Recently, the Supreme Court denied review to both a rifle and magazine ban challenge, but now one of the cases that they prior GVR'd is a focus of the Supreme Court, and it now also just jumped up in importance. In this challenge, the Trump DOJ just stated expressly in the case that they believe magazine and rifle bans do in fact violate the Second Amendment. This is a huge development, so let's break down what is happening in this critical case. Now, before we jump into this video, if you've ever found yourself wondering what your legal rights actually are and potentially how fast everything could go wrong with one bad decision, I've actually put something together for you guys. I've been working on something behind the scenes that's going to help a lot of people stay protected and you really just stay one step ahead of all the laws and everything that's constantly changing in this landscape. The full announcement is going to drop next week, but if you want to be the first one to find out what's, becoming available to you guys, what I'm doing and what I've put together, you can sign up with the link down below and get on the wait list so you're notified first of, when this is released and, what's actually coming. You can get first, eyes on all of this. I would love your support. Again, if you're interested, if you want to get on the wait list and get notified when it officially is announced, you can be the first one to find out if you join the wait list. Again, check out the link down below, or you can use this QR code here on the screen. As I mentioned in the intro, in this video, I'm going to be discussing two critical cases which have now been consolidated and are currently in front of the Third Circuit en banc panel. These cases deal with the state of New Jersey's ban on rifles and magazines. This magazine ban case was recently granted, vacated, and remanded back down to the district court for a new decision in light of what the Supreme Court said in their 6-3 ruling in Bruin. Well, that district court recently issued a ruling in two consolidated cases called ANJRPC versus Platkin, and then also Cheeseman versus Platkin. And in this ruling, the court came to a very perplexing Second Amendment analysis, and the court found that the state's ban on Colt AR-15s is unconstitutional and must be struck down. However, in that same ruling, they decided to not actually issue a ruling or decision on any other aspects of the state's ban on other types of rifles, pistols, and shotguns. It also found that magazines that hold more than 10 rounds are in fact arms for the purposes of the text of the Second Amendment, but they then stated that a state like the state of New Jersey could outright ban those items. This horrible ruling was then appealed to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, and it was argued back on July 1st. However, we recently got a very surprising update in this case. The Third Circuit en banc panel on their own decided to take review of this case from the 3-judge panel, and now they're going to rule on it on their own. Now, in response to this, and in response to the en banc panel taking this case early sua sponte on their own, the state of New Jersey submitted a supplemental order arguing that this court here, the Third Circuit, should follow what another circuit court has recently done. That was the Second Circuit in regards to rifle and magazine bans. And now also, this has caused the Trump DOJ to jump into this challenge. The Trump DOJ recently filed an amicus brief to the Third Circuit arguing that magazine and rifle bans are violations of the Second Amendment. This is a big move from the administration, and it's a great, development for this case and adds additional support to this challenge for the Third Circuit en banc panel to rule the correct way. Now, this case involves the state of New Jersey's ban on so-called assault weapons and their magazine ban as well. When it comes to the magazine ban, essentially back in 2018, the state of New Jersey passed Assembly Bill 2761, banning the possession of magazines that had the ability to hold more than 10 rounds. This case initially was reviewed and made its way to the Supreme Court back in 2022, but it was later granted, vacated, and remanded back down to the district court in light of what the Supreme Court said in Bruin. Like a lot of other cases after Bruin, they were put on hold initially and then GVR'd all the way back to the lower court for a new decision because the analysis was corrected by the Supreme Court in Bruin. The district court there in New Jersey then consolidated multiple cases and decided to rule on both a rifle ban and a magazine ban. Now, in that consolidated ruling, the district court showed how they were not going to faithfully apply the Bruin holding because the judge there believed that the Supreme Court got the Bruin analysis wrong. So in that ruling, the district court stated that it is hard to accept the Supreme Court's pronouncements that certain firearms policy choices are off the table when frequently radical individuals possess and use these same firearms for evil purposes. Now, despite that, the court stated that it was bound to have to follow what the Supreme Court said in Bruin in some way, and so it issued a hodgepodge decision, essentially protecting only limited set of rifles, the Colt AR-15. So essentially it only focused on AR-15s, but then at the same time said that the state's, restrictions on other rifles could be upheld. They weren't going to address those. And then also it upheld the state's magazine ban. That horrible ruling is now up in front of the Third Circuit, and originally a 3-judge panel heard oral arguments on this case on July 1st. So this went in front of a 3-judge panel for arguments, and then it was set to be ruled on. However, all of that has now changed. Before the 3-judge panel could actually rule on this case, the en banc panel in the Third Circuit on their own, sua sponte, decided to issue a notice that they're going to take review of this case. So they took it out of the hands of that 3-judge panel, and now they're going to roll on it en banc. The current makeup of the en banc panel is 7 Republican appointees and then 6 Democrats. And it seems like the state of New Jersey kind of senses that there's some trouble in this case. Recently, they submitted a supplemental brief to the en banc panel, arguing that the court there should actually follow what the Second Circuit recently did in another case dealing with rifles and magazine bans. So New Jersey is now scrambling to support their state ban in light of the en banc panel taking this case sua sponte on their own. But things just got even more interesting and potentially even worse for the state of New Jersey. Harmeet Dillon, on behalf of the Trump administration, just filed an amicus brief to the Third Circuit en banc panel, and they argue that these magazine bans and state, bans that are categorically banning these items should be struck down. And so they're siding with the plaintiffs here, arguing against these New Jersey bans. Now, in this brief, she argues that the Second Amendment guarantees the right of the people to keep and bear arms. The United States understands it to be undisputed in this case that AR-15s qualify as arms for good reason. The Supreme Court has recognized that at the founding, all firearms constituted arms. This amicus brief addresses 2 principles of Second Amendment doctrine that have confused other courts. First, the Second Amendment does not secure the right to possess and carry arms only for self-defense or sporting related purposes, but rather for all traditionally lawful purposes. History and tradition confirm that these purposes include the common defense. Second, the Second Amendment protects arms that are in common use among law-abiding citizens for lawful purposes. To be sure, some other courts have criticized this common use test, but the Supreme Court's cases clearly show that it is the governing test for courts determining which arms the Second Amendment protects. Not only that, but the common use test has deep roots in both English and American law. The Second Amendment's irreducible minimum guarantee incorporates both principles. Legislators may not completely ban arms that are in common use among law-abiding citizens for lawful purposes without running afoul of the Constitution. Applying these principles to the state law at issue in this case, New Jersey's complete bans on possessing rifles such as AR-15s and magazines with more than 10 rounds capacity violate the Second Amendment. Because rifles such as the AR-15 are in common use for lawful purposes, including self-defense, sporting, and the common defense, the Second Amendment protects law-abiding New Jerseyans' rights to possess these items. Although such rifles and magazines are subject to reasonable regulations that are consistent with the nation's historical tradition of firearms regulations, the complete bans at issue here in this case are unconstitutional. They go on to state that this court must make clear that the Second Amendment does not allow New Jersey to ban the most popular rifle in America, the AR-15, nor does it allow New Jersey to ban more than 10-round magazines, which are significantly more popular than AR-15s themselves. So the Trump DOJ argues that an outright ban on rifles and magazines like the one here in the state of New Jersey is in fact unconstitutional. However, there are statements there that I mentioned and I wanted to bring to your guys' attention that, here they're kind of hinting at maybe being okay with some restrictions on those types of items, but they are actually arguing here that an outright ban or a categorical ban on those items like rifles and magazines is unconstitutional and must be struck down. So that's also something that we may want to keep our eyes on, because here they're hinting at maybe being okay with other restrictions on magazines and rifles, but they're not okay with a state outright banning those items. But generally, this is great news coming from the Trump DOJ. they have jumped in support of this challenge, and they're arguing that this state rifle and magazine ban, this complete ban on the purchase and possession of these items, they're arguing that that is unconstitutional. This will now be argued in front of the en banc panel in the Third Circuit on October 15th, so really soon this is going to be in front of the en banc panel and argued. And I would maybe suspect also that the Trump DOJ may request additional time during those arguments to actually argue on behalf, of the plaintiffs here, argue on behalf of striking down these state bans. They did a similar thing also in the Seventh Circuit. So it would be interesting also to see if they want to take that same approach here in this Third Circuit en banc panel case dealing with New Jersey's ban on these items. So as we get more information as this develops, I will let you guys know. If you like this video and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that, of course, is to subscribe to the channel. Also, you can check out my website, armedscholar.com. Over there, we have a lot for you guys. But in general, thank you guys so much for all of your support. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.